Gone. This awesome story is written by getyaisha. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. Life had never been easy for Jesse. He'd always been a loner, and for the most part, he liked it that way. Despite his aversion to social situations, occasionally he would get invited to random gatherings which he would typically turn down. His circle of friends was closer to a dot than anything else, but the one person he could never turn down was his cousin Shelby. She had always been a bright, bubbly person, the life of the party, and Jesse loved that about her. As children, they were more like brother and sister than cousins. They were constantly together, getting into trouble or having fun. But as it always goes, life has a way of creating distance. They went to separate colleges and eventually wound up in different states, living different lives, disconnected by thousands of miles. But no matter how far apart they were, when they got together, she could always get him to go out and party. It had been close to a year since the two were last together. Jesse was a semi-successful writer. He built up his name by creating a few popular creepypasta stories and writing scripts for a few low-budget films. He just landed his first big project writing for a high-level narration company and wanted to celebrate with the one person in the world that would be happy to see him. He called ahead, telling her the good news, then booked a flight out to see her. The moment he spotted her, he knew something was wrong. There was no light in her eyes. Her normally warm complexion was dull and dark. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Shelby genuinely smiled, and he could see wrinkles that seemed out of place on such a young face. She was only 27. They were a year apart. It didn't make sense. Once they greeted each other, Jesse narrowed his eyes at her and stepped back. "Is everything all right? What's with the face? You look like you've got some heavy shit going on." The phony smile slipped away and she put her head down. She could never keep anything from him. They'd always had that sort of connection. "Yeah, everything's fine. I just have a lot on my plate these days. We can talk about it later. Right now, let's get this party started. There's an Uber coming in an hour and I've got a booth at the bar. Grab your shit, cowboy. It's time to drink." She flashed that usual happy smile, and for a second she looked like her old self. Shaking his head and grinning, Jesse followed her to the bar. They had a tradition. The first drink was always a shot of Jack with the beer back, and they had to chug the first round. When the cups hit the table, they both laughed and burped, being silly for a moment, before ordering another round and talking. She congratulated him on his new job, and they talked for a while about different stories. But when Jesse asked her about hers, she paused. I'm in trouble, Jess. I messed up and I don't know how to fix it. I lost my job and I needed a way to pay rent, so I got a gig with a courier service. I thought it was just drugs or something like that. Didn't matter to me, I was just delivering it. And 2 weeks ago, a small wooden box was delivered to my apartment. I was supposed to drop it off with another courier, but when I got there, everyone was gone. I tried calling Anthony. He's kind of like my boss, I guess, but he didn't answer. When I went to drop the box off at his house, no one was there either. I didn't want to keep the thing, so I left it behind some potted plants near his front door. When I got back to my apartment, it was there on my bed. I've tried everything I could think of to get rid of it, but it just keeps coming back. Taking a long drink from a fresh beer, Jesse tried to understand what she was saying. He couldn't just write it off, but it didn't make sense. Shelby had always been on the wild side, so hearing she'd gotten mixed up in something wasn't out of the ordinary. This was weird, even for her. Letting the cup down, he watched her take a second shot and shook his head. Okay, I get that the box thing is some strange shit. I can't deny that. If you can't do anything about the box, just leave it alone. Ignore it and move on with your life. What's the problem? Could see she was visibly shaken just talking about it, nervously chewing her bottom lip. She let out a breath and slumped her shoulders. That's the problem. It won't let me. Every time I try to sleep, I instantly wake up somewhere else with it. Jessie sat there for a moment, waiting for her to explain further, but she didn't. Instead, she took a sip from her beer, then nodded at him with an odd smirk on her face. A little confused and slightly freaked out by the way she was acting, Jesse leaned back in his seat. Other places? What do you mean other places? Are you waking up outside or in someone else's house? Tell me you're just messing with me right now. This is serious. You could really get hurt waking up in the wrong place. Have you talked to anyone? Nodding her head, she took another sip and looked around the bar. Yeah, checked myself into the hospital, but when I went to sleep, I woke up somewhere else with the box. Seeing that she was avoiding the question, Jesse tried not to lose his temper. You keep saying that, but you're not telling me anything. Waking up where? What are you talking about? Shelby sat up straight in her seat and looked him in the eyes. It's here, but not here. It's dark and cold. The people are all insane. I run till I find a way back, or fall asleep and wake up back here. I don't know where there is, and I don't have any other way to explain it. I'm not crazy, Jess. This is real, and I need someone to help me. No one believes me. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't either. I'm not sure I believe it till it happens, and it's getting worse. I'm gone longer and longer each time, but when I get back, only a few minutes have passed. The last time it felt like a week, but it was only a few hours. You actually brought me back that time. I followed the sound of the phone ringing and it led me home. Please, Jess, you have to help me. Just stay with me and make sure I don't go to sleep, and if I do, you have to wake me up. He couldn't turn her down. There was no way he could live with himself if he didn't at least try to help. It all sounded so insane. He was sure she needed professional help, but until he could convince her of that, he would do his best to look after her. Wasn't long before their ride arrived and they went back to her place. As usual, her apartment was spotless, but every light was on and she had 3 pots of coffee brewing. Since she'd always had trouble sleeping while it was hot, she had the heater on, keeping the temperature close to 90 at all times. Jessie almost walked away when the door opened and the heat wave slapped him in the face. Then he saw the box. It wasn't what he was expecting. In his mind, he'd made it dark and ominous, but in reality, it was just a well-polished, smooth wooden box about the size of a loaf of bread. There was no visible way to open it, but when he shook it, he could hear something bumping around inside. "So, what's in it? Have you opened it?" Shelby told him to put it down. She didn't want anything to happen to him. Jessie didn't know what to make of that. He wondered what she meant by it, but he didn't bother asking. Once he'd made himself comfortable, they watched movies and drank coffee while they made fun of cheesy low-budget horror flicks, eventually deciding to binge-watch the ones he'd written. They made it through the first night, but Jessie wasn't sure he could stay awake much longer. He hadn't pulled an all-nighter since college, and even then he would end up passed out on the floor at some point. Between the heat and the constant flow of coffee, they both took turns going back and forward to the restroom. He sat on the couch sweating, waiting on Shelby to come out of the restroom, when he realised she'd been in there for a long time. Calling out to her, he got up, went to the door and knocked. There was no response. Trying a few more times, he waited a second, then turned the knob, halfway expecting to find her asleep on the toilet. "Hey, Shell, are you okay in there? Didn't fall asleep, did you?" He continued knocking as he slowly opened the door to find the restroom empty. Shocked, Jessie stood there for a moment, scratching his head. The apartment wasn't that big. There was no way she'd snuck out without him seeing her. Trying to rationalise what was happening, he looked around, attempting to recreate how she could have gotten past him. Wasn't possible. As he turned towards the table, he noticed the box was gone. Before he could wrap his mind around it, the bedroom door burst open and Shelby came rushing out screaming. Her clothes were bloody and torn. He raced towards him and vanished in a cloud of black smoke before reappearing, slamming into him from behind, sending them both tumbling to the floor. During the collision, she dropped the box and it slid, coming to a rest against the refrigerator. In a combination of confusion and anger, Jessie blurted out, "What the hell was that? What happened to you?" Shelby couldn't respond. She lay there bleeding from cuts all over her body, gasping for air. When she'd finally caught her breath, the first thing she asked was how long she'd been gone. When he told her it had only been a few minutes, she started crying. "That can't be right. It can't be. I was there for 2 days. I saw you there, but I couldn't get to you. Then they started chasing me. They wanted my skin. They tried to cut it off, but I wouldn't let them. I fought and I ran till I fell into the water and wound up here." Jessie was speechless. There was no words in his brain to explain just how completely insane the last few moments had been. "Jel, I don't know what to say. We have to get you to a doctor. I can't do anything about this. I don't know what this is." Drying her tears, she glanced at Jesse and went wide-eyed. He paused for a second, confused by the expression on her face, till he realised she wasn't looking at him. Slowly turning to get a look for himself, time stopped. The box was open. An inconceivable black fluid crept across the tile, doubling and tripling in size every time it breached new ground. The heat was being sucked out of the air, replaced by a bone-chilling cold as frost formed on the walls. And before either of them could react, it was done. There was no transition. Their brightly coloured world was now muted and dull. Shelby completely broke down, muttering, "No!" over and over while she curled into the fetal position. Jesse struggled to get to his feet. It felt like gravity was fighting him every inch of the way. Shelby's words became slower and slower with each cadence while he fought his way to the door. He yelled, "Get up!" But the words came out so slowly they were almost delayed. Turning his focus back to the door, Jesse gave it everything he had. His muscles burned and trembled through the fight, and the moment he turned the knob, the apartment became a vacuum as time shifted back into place. Jesse and Shelby were violently ejected from the room, slamming against the wall of the hall before crashing to the floor. Coughing and wheezing for air, they both rolled around on the ground, still disorientated from the sudden change. Having gone through it several times, Shelby was the first to recover. Sat up still slightly winded and told Jesse they had to go. People were coming, and as the words left her lips, stairwell doors at the end of the hall were thrown open. 3 men covered in blood rushed in and stopped when they saw the 2 of them getting up off the floor. Tallest of the trio, a thin man with short dark hair, smiled a wicked smile and took an almost joyful step in their direction before stopping while staring at them. His smile, if it were humanely possible, got wider, exposing his brown blood-stained teeth just before he shouted, "Die!" and the other 2 came running. Jesse and Shelby darted away as fast as they could, but the men were catching up. Bursting through the doors of another stairwell, Jesse slipped in a pool of blood and fell. Shelby hadn't slipped. She was a couple of steps ahead, rushing down the stairs. As Jesse got up, one of the men blindly rushed in and tripped over him, then tumbled over the rail, falling 5 flights to the bottom. Getting up quickly, Jesse ran to catch up as they raced down to the first floor and out into the streets. There was no time to pay attention to their surroundings. Jesse followed closely as they ran till they ducked into a dark alley and hid. Shelby was right. Everything was exactly the same, but it was dark and cold. Jesse glanced up at the sky. His jaw dropped at the sight of an empty void. No stars, no moon, just unending blackness that reminded him of the liquid pouring out of that box. Without the light coming from the buildings and street lamps, it would have been pitch black. The darkness of the alley was the only thing keeping them safe, while the men from the building ran past looking for them. After a few minutes, they heard one of them yell out, "Over here!" followed by a woman's voice screaming for help. The moment they were sure both men were distracted, they rushed out of the alley and ran in the opposite direction. Jesse had no idea where they were running to. All he could do was follow Shelby till she stopped. This time she led him to a park where they hid in a community centre. She told him this was the last place she'd hid. Once they were inside, they'd had to feel their way around in the dark. Luckily, the exit signs that cast enough light for them to get to a back room. A lamp desk was their only source of light, but it was more than enough. Jesse was exhausted. He couldn't run anymore. Lying on the floor, trying to gather his thoughts, he listened to Shelby muttering to herself. She rambled on for a moment, then stopped and turned to face him. "We can't sleep here. It won't work. We'll just sleep. When we wake up, we'll still be here." Jesse didn't understand. None of this was making sense. The confusion of suddenly being transported to an alternate dimension was impossible to process. He lay there on the floor trying to focus while listening to Shelby ramble on. "You don't know what it's like here. They won't stop. If you stay anywhere too long, they find you. We have to go." Sitting up, he looked at her nervously pacing in the tiny office. "I need you to calm down. I don't know what's going on. What are they supposed to do?" Shelby huffed and stood still for a moment. "If we want to get out of here, we have to find a safe place to sleep. The catch is, you can only sleep in a place once. We have to find a quiet place with no one there, or we are stuck here." She stopped and started frantically looking around the office. "Where is it? It's not here. It's supposed to be here. Do you have it?" Not knowing what she was talking about, Jesse held up his hands, and Shelby started to cry. "The box didn't follow me. The box didn't. Oh no, no, no. We have to go back for it. We can't get home without it." She rushed out of the office, forcing Jesse to scramble to his feet before running to catch up to her. The minute they were out of the building, the sound of dogs barking echoed through the distance. Shelby gasped, then looked around and said, "Run!" Doing his best to keep up, they sprinted away as nearly a dozen wild dogs charged after them. Even with a head start, they couldn't get away. Dogs were nipping at their arms and legs in no time. Shelby, who was still out front, made a hard right turn down an alley. While shaking off one of the dogs, Jesse was barely able to turn in time and caught sight of her climbing a dumpster to get up a nearby fire escape. Following her lead, he did his best to mimic what he'd seen her do, but one of the dogs managed to take a nice bite from his forearm. Trying not to think about the pain, he climbed the dumpster, taking another bite to the leg before making his way up the fire escape, where Shelby was already headed for the roof. When he finally caught up to her, she was looking for another way out. "What the fuck, man? You left me back there." Shelby finally stopped and put her head down. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I didn't know this was going to happen." Still angry, Jesse didn't respond. He found a place to sit and tried to rest while he checked his bites. After a few hours, the dogs finally straggled off and they climbed down. Trip back to her apartment was slow, and they wound up hiding more than once along the way, but they eventually made it. Shelby was nearly skipping as they approached the door. Gripping the knob, she turned and smiled at Jessie, then pushed. It wouldn't open. Her smile turned to a frown as she put her weight into it, but it wouldn't budge. She slammed her weight against the door, screaming for it to open as Jessie joined in, but no matter how hard they tried, it wouldn't move. Without saying a word, Shelby turned and ran back to the stairwell. She was headed for the roof. Jessie followed. When he caught up, she was peering over the ledge. It's right there. I always leave my kitchen window open. I can climb down to it and get the box. If you lower me down, I can get in. Jessie didn't want to do it. Tried to convince her there had to be another way, but deep down he knew there wasn't. Look, Shell, I want to get out of here too, but I don't think this is a good idea. What if you slip? There's no way you're coming out of that without at least getting hurt. Gave him her usual devious grin. No balls, no glory. Back up, cowboy. We're doing this. Letting out a sigh, he shook his head and walked over to the edge. He'd never been afraid of heights, but there was something horrifying about staring down into the darkness. Shelby laid face down on the ledge and eased her legs over the edge, while Jessie held her arms. When she was over, it was only a moment before her feet were on the outside windowsill. Jessie was keeping a firm grip on both her wrists, till she asked him to let go of her right arm so she could open the window. The moment he did, his heart dropped. The sudden shift in weight nearly made her lose her balance. She looked up and gave him a nervous smile, then let out a deep breath before she tried to open the window. Just like the door, it wouldn't budge. Quickly reaching back up for Jessie to grab her wrist, she told him, "Hold on tight," then kicked the window as hard as she could. When the glass shattered, a loud whistling sound cut through the silence and she was ripped from his grip, nearly pulling him over the edge as she was violently pulled in by the vacuum. On the way in, her head smacked against the windowsill, leaving a trail of blood as she vanished from sight. Jessie yelled, "No!" while pulling back from the edge, trying not to get sucked in as well. He could hear her screaming, but it didn't last long. It was quickly silenced by the sound of flesh and bone being ripped apart. The moment it was over, everything stopped. Jessie lay there, staring into the pitch black sky, with tears welling up in his eyes. She was gone, and he knew it. Taking a deep breath while wiping away the tears, he paused for a moment. As his vision cleared, he squinted and blinked, then went wide-eyed. The moon and stars were hanging high in the night sky. A warm breeze seemed to drag the sounds of the city behind it, as the world around him regained its colour. Sitting up, Jessie tried to make sense of what he'd just been through. The glimmer of hope that maybe Shelby was alive in this world got him on his feet, racing down to her apartment. He didn't bother to knock. He went straight for the knob, and it was unlocked. Pushing up the door with a hopeful smile, his world came crumbling down. She was lying on the floor near the kitchen, exactly where she'd been when she reappeared and knocked him down. Her body was a broken, bloody mess, but worst of all were her eyes. Her contorted frame was left partially facing the door and her eyes were wide open. They were lifeless and solid black. Jesse yelled for help and one of the neighbours called the police. He was repeatedly questioned and eventually released. He would find out later that every bone in her body had been shattered, but the exact cause of death was unknown. An 8-ball hemorrhage caused her eyes to turn black, but there was no way to explain her heart exploding or her lungs being deflated to the point they were flat. The list of details went on, and Jesse went through every bit of information he could get his hands on. The thing he was looking for never turned up in the paperwork. There was no mention of the box anywhere. He kept that thought replaying in his head the whole way home. Days and weeks went by and no real answers ever came. Jesse hadn't been able to function. No one would believe his story, so he decided to write it up as fiction and send it in to his publisher, not knowing it would be the last story he ever wrote. His story grabbed massive attention once it was narrated and distributed online. People began inquiring about his work. The publisher tried contacting him several times before sending someone to check on him, but when they arrived, Jesse was nowhere to be found. His apartment was completely empty aside from one object, a small, well-polished wooden box. And I hope you enjoy the blooper reel. His circle of friends was closer. He'd just landed his first big project writing for a high-level narration company and wanted to celebrate with the one person in the world that would be happy to see her normally warm. She flashed that usual happy face. But when Jesse asked her about hers, I thought it was just... could see she was visibly shaken. It wasn't long before their ride arrived. In his mind, he'd made... During the collision, she dropped the box and it slid, coming to... I fought and I ran. Getting up quickly, Jesse ran to catch up as they raced. Jesse glanced up at the sky. His jaw dropped at the sight of... Luckily, the exit signs that cast enough light... for them to get... Shelby huffed and stood there. Once she was over, it was only a moment before it... Sudden shift in weight nearly made him... He didn't bother to knock. He went straight for the knob and it was unlocked. His apartment was completely empty. Hey family, please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to chokehold that notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. and by subscribing you'll be the first to see all of our new spooky creepypasta stories. A very big thank you to getyaisha for allowing me to narrate this awesome story. Make sure to check out getyaisha's Reddit for more brilliant stories. And why not hashtag Cryptids Roost in your comments. If you would like to support the channel, I have an account at buymeacoffee.com or via paypal.me/cryptidsroost. And don't forget to check out the end screen, the above. That will also list some more videos in my back catalogue. Take care everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful and peaceful night. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.